she believes that each one of you young ladies can be strong, just like her, and that each one of you is going to make a difference. So each one of you young ladies can be chief of your tribe one day. And so I know that what she says is true, and what she says she believes. And they talk about people who walk their walk. Well, she does. She just doesn't talk it, she walks it. And so with that, I'd like to introduce to you Ms. Caleen Sisk.
My heart to yours. We'll put our heads together and our hearts together, and we'll find a way to change things so things are good for us. And we have a long journey. We've been on a long journey. I'm at the end of somebody's 7th generation. When they were looking out for the 7 generations down the line, I'm standing at that point of somebody of my ancestors, my elders, of their 7th generation. For my grams, I was the 5th generation from her in the leadership. And so we look at our world in that way. It's like these guys are starting their life right now as somebody's 7th generation. That they've been born into a time that we don't really know how to maneuver in that time yet. But we know that we have to make each other strong enough, safe enough, and happy enough to continue on in the good way, on a good road. And in my tribe, we're bringing back our full ceremony for our women, the Bathos Chonas. And in the Bathos Chonas, we get our girls ready to come into the womanhood. But this means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It's not just one thing for women. It's a thing for everyone to have a place and a respect for, not just the woman who's going through her time to come into her womanhood. But it also requires that the elder ladies dance for her and step aside and make room for her to stand with them. That's one of the things that we have sort of put aside. We've lost that. And we need to bring that back into place, because when they make their move, when they have that magic to bring life into the world, then we as elder women must step aside and let you stand with us and make decisions with us and to help direct the generations that are coming up after you. And these are the things that, we want to have our people understand. And not only does that happen, but the young men dance for her. The young men dance for her in honor of her position in life. And they put down their footsteps on those sacred grounds to bring in the deer dance. And the deer dance for the women represents to us that spirit being that helps us learn how to grieve and take care of that grieving process. Because in most of our tribes, the women are the one who grieves for the elders, they grieve for the children, they grieve for the men. They're the ones who are left with the heartache for most things that go on. And so the deer is that spirit that comes in and helps her take care of herself during that time. Because it's the women who know how many babies are born. They know how many people are sick. They know how many elders are still healthy or in a bedridden condition. And they are the ones who lose their warriors out to something else. And so they're the ones who have to have that strong heart about getting through hard times like that. And that's why the men bring in that deer dance for her. But in addition to that, the men also bring in a crazy dance. And the crazy dance is a dance that they do to make the young woman laugh. And her job is not to laugh at silly young men. If you want a silly young man, then you'll just go right along with it, right? But if you have any standards and you have some morals and you have some principles, and they have to abide by that and rise to the occasion to be an actual partner and not just a funny man, then this is what we're trying to teach our girls. So the dance goes on until she finally does laugh, and you have to see some of that. Oh my God. But it also brings that kind of humility and that kind of perseverance from men to realize what they will do, what they should do for women. And we also have, this weekend we'll be having the men climb what we call the Two Sisters. And the Two Sisters are the mountains that we are under when the Bacchus Jonas takes place. And the Two Sisters are the teachers of the young men to, one, rely on each other, but also to develop their relationships with women. More than just a pretty face, but the road is difficult, the road is hard, there are many situations that need to be analyzed, and it needs to be taken a careful judgment call on what you're going to do. So these two sisters, during the Bacchus Jonas, it's said that the spirit beings of that mountain, they stopped what they're doing. The two sisters stopped what they're doing, and they come down and they spend that time with the young girls. And the young girl is separated from the major camp on the other side of the river in her own hut with her attendant, her firekeeper, and her protector. And all of these are of her own age, because they are to go into the future together. And they should be taking care of each other. They're responsible to and for each other. That's the thing that we have to bring back into our tribal ways these days, is that we have to be responsible to and for each other. Not just, doing what we have been doing. We've got to turn those things back around, in my opinion. And that's what I'm trying to do with my people, my tribe, is to put those things back into perspective, where we are taking care of not only recognizing how sacred our young girls are, and the fact that they are able to bring life into our world, but also recognizing our connection to those sacred places. The mountains, the streams, the pools, the places up the river that they go, and the dances that occur, and the songs that are sung for these young girls. This year we'll have 2 young girls coming across. And part of what you'll see in our film is that it is not an easy process, and it's not made easy because of the Forest Service, because of outsiders. Not because we don't know how to do it, not because we don't know the songs to sing or the dances to do, but because the grounds that it needs to happen on don't belong to us no more. It belongs to the Forest Service. It's a public access land. And so we have a lot of problems trying to access our own place by keeping other people who are not invited out. But the Forest Service says that anybody can walk down to the dance circle by the arbor because it's public land. And they can walk right in. It's not against the law. They can boat up the river because it's not against the law. We don't have the right for privacy during this time because, one, we're not Indians, because we're not on that list that BIA has so gratefully created, in the 80s. They put people on this list, and if you're not on the list, there is not a description of your rights. It just says, if you're federally recognized, you have all these rights. But if you're not federally recognized, the BIA does not describe unrecognized tribes. It doesn't put a definition to unrecognized tribes. Only that you're not on this list. But they don't also say all of your rights are terminated. So every time that we hold a ceremony, we are breaking the law. We tried to use the American Indian Religious Freedoms Act. We tried to use the First Amendment religious freedom. And in both cases, in the First Amendment, we were told that, you know, we don't have that because we don't have a church-based faith. We are in the outdoors, right? We're in the woods. We're on the river. It's not a church per se. And in the American Indian Religious Freedoms Act, even though my Grams was one of the first people to utilize that act by gaining access to our sacred places on the McLeod River, we nowadays, because of that list, since then that list has been created, and somehow we didn't get on the list, therefore we cannot use the American Indian Religious Freedoms Act anymore. So we have some major problems with the Forest Service that we're trying to figure out. We have a lawsuit against them for discriminatory treatment against us, for blocking our rights to our sacred places, for us to practice our religion and continue our distinctive way of life. Because we only have that area to learn how to be Winnemum Wintu. There's nowhere else in the world that we could go to learn how to be a Winnemum Wintu person, tribe. And so, you know, we have a long way to go on those kinds of issues, but we also have not applied for recognition. You know, they have a process for applying for recognition. Many tribes are in that process. They've been in that process for 30 years, maybe even more. But for us, my Gram said at the time, when they were saying, well, you can apply. If you're not on this list, you can always apply to be on the list. She said to me, why would we apply? Why would we apply to be Winnemum Wintu? And who would we apply to? The big Winnemum Wintu Council, who's going to know whether or not we're dancing Winnemum, we're speaking Winnemum, we're carrying on Winnemum way of life? Will they know that? She said, it's not like applying for a bank loan. And if they tell you no, you can't have it, then you just don't get the loan, right? What if they tell you no, you're not a Winnemum? What if they say that? What if they deny you that your tribe doesn't exist? And so we have never submitted a letter of intent to become a Winnemum Wintu because we already are. And now we're seeing the results up and down the state. You know, there's been at least 5 tribes who have been denied status under that process, including the Talawa Nation, which I'm thinking is an alert system to the entire California tribes because, you know, the Talawa are like us. They have their language, they have their sacred places, they have their dances, they have everything that was there before. And how do you deny a people like that? So I was thinking, you know, the tribes that are applying would be ready to come together and say, you know what, BIA, we're tossing your application out of the state. It doesn't belong here. And we're not going to apply no more through that process because these guys have been in there for 30 years and no results, right? The only results is denial. There was only one tribe in California who ever made it through the process, which was back in 1978 or 79. The Timbisha Shoshone made it through the process, and right after they did that, they tightened up the process and said all 7 criteria have to be met. But at the same time, they took rancherias, which were homeless Indian lands, and turned them into tribes. They were never set up to be tribes, but somehow the BIA has the magic to say, dubbed your tribe, now act like a tribe, you know, behave like a tribe. And these tribes are now still struggling how to exist, how to get along, how to do things, how to maintain things, how to access their own sacred sites. Because in Redding, you know, we have Redding Rancheria, which has 20 or 30 acres. And that's really their line of authority, is that 30 acres. They're federally recognized, and they are really the authority for that 30 acres. The rest of the acreage belongs to the Wintu tribe, which is, there are two Wintu groups, the Winnemum Wintu and the Wintu tribe, which have access to all of that land historically, which are unrecognized, right? And so there's a lot of problems existing, like, I don't know if you've heard of AB 52, which is redesigning the CEQA and trying to install only federally recognized tribes have a right to protect their sacred places. And that's coming about in it's either Paula or a Southern California tribe, what's her name? Miranda. Huh? Linda Miranda, or Laura Miranda from Pachanga or Paula, that's riding the AB 52 bill, which I think Cotto is introducing it. And the main change on that for CEQA is to drop all unrecognized tribes from having a right to protect our sacred sites. And why federally recognized tribes want to do that, I'm not quite understanding what that is, because so much of the state is not protected, by federally recognized tribes. In our area, there are no federally recognized tribes on the McCloud River. And I don't know any of them, like Pitt River or Redding Rancheria, who have enough money to come out and fight for our rights, or that they would do that. So there's a lot of issues in the state about protecting these sacred places, but also about water. Things up and down the state, and there are a lot of different things that are happening with water. And for us, we're the Winnemum Wintu. Winnemum meaning middle water. Winnemum means middle water. Wintu means people. So we're the middle water people. And we sing to water. We go to the headwaters at Mount Shasta and we sing to that water that comes all the way down to the delta. It comes all the way down to the delta. And in that singing, we are putting down those prayers that we know this water comes from somewhere. It doesn't just come right here. The clouds come in, it drops the snow. Maybe that snow is from Japan. Maybe that snow is from Hawaii. Maybe that snow is from Alaska. But it comes from somewhere. It's not just that water, but it's the world's water. And that water that comes up from our spring that we say is our sacred home, where we came out of, that water is an artesian volcanic spring. And so inside, we believe that that water goes around the world to the different sacred mountains that hold Mother Earth together. And so when we're going there, we're praying for the world's water, not just Winnemum, not just us, but we realize when that water comes out and we sing to it and it passes us by, and it's on its way to the ocean. And when it gets to the ocean, that's where the salmon pick up the issues of the people and keeps them coming back. When they hear these songs, it keeps them coming back. And now they have a lot of problems because of the dams and all of the things that are in the way of water. But, when we think about water nowadays, how many rivers can you drink out of? Can you drink out of any of the rivers around here? No. Most people would say we carry our water even when we go backpacking, or we have filter systems that we utilize when we even go backpacking. But before this time, like my Graham's hunting days, and even my hunting days earlier on in the 60s, nobody carried water. We drank out of the springs. There was water all over the mountains, and you didn't have to carry water. But now they say that every river in California is contaminated. And when we say that, nobody is really appalled. Nobody is like, what? You gotta be kidding. All of the rivers, are you sure? It's like we are so dumbed down that we just accept it. Like, oh well. It's like, are we oh welling the very life support that no one can live without? no one can do without. And we don't really react. We don't really hold the state accountable for cleaning up that water. Right now, the state is fighting over where to send the water. The contaminated water is being fought over. It just appalls me that we're fighting over where to send the contaminated water, right? Have you heard of the twin tunnels? Yeah, the twin tunnels, and it affects everybody on the coastline. The twin tunnels is these giant tunnels that are going to be big enough to divert the entire Sacramento River. And when they divert the entire Sacramento River, that means right now that there won't be any fresh water going into the Delta. And do you know where the Delta is? It's the Bay Area, right? San Francisco Bay Area, all of that is the Delta. And in the Delta, do you know what the Delta is for? It's like an incubator. It is a nursery. It is a changing of times for salmon and other fish and everything in there. It's a very delicate part of the state, part of the water system. And does anybody know what happens when a delta dies? The whole coastline is going to change. All up and down the coast will change when that delta dies. We have the largest delta on the Western Hemisphere. The largest one. Did you know that? We have the two longest running rivers that go into that delta. That we had the highest population of salmon, wild Chinook salmon, running in this state, right? On our river, we had the first U.S. fish hatchery set up on our river. Because of the salmon situation in the States and around the world, our salmon was sent around the world. We sent it to the Mississippi River, it went all over, but it never survived. You know, they didn't know the difference between Pacific salmon and Atlantic salmon. Salmon that only do a run one time and the repeat runners. And so they didn't know, those were the fish experts, right? They didn't bother to really believe the Indians here on this coast, right? Because all of the Indians told them themselves, well, they all die. Oh, no, they don't, because back east they don't, right? So the fish experts were certain that they would survive, but they didn't survive. And on our river, we did a ceremony because of the situation that happened here in the state. And it was told to us at that time that we needed to send the salmon through the ice waterfall on Mount Shasta. And at the time, it's in the late 1800s, right? And we have plenty of salmon. I mean, our river is stocked, chock full of salmon. No one can believe that there would be a time in the future that there would be not one salmon in that river. Not one thought that that would ever happen. But that ceremony was done, the salmon was sent through the ice waterfall, and we were told that there they will wait. And so we go on with our life, right? By 1945, they're filling Shasta Dam. There's no way for the salmon to get around the dam. And 7 years later, all of the McCloud River salmon are dead. They swim up the river, the farthest on the river chain, to the highest mountain, to the tributaries there, and they are timed to spawn in those locations. And until they can get there, a salmon will do everything that it can to get to its spawning ground, including kill itself before it spawns. And so, you know, hundreds of thousands of salmon died below Shasta Dam, trying to swim up to the tributaries on Mount Shasta. So in 2004, we held a war dance on Shasta Dam because they had talked about raising the Shasta Dam, like we have up here. No dam raise. That, we wanted to tell the world. We wanted to tell the world what was going on with a small tribe here in the States. And we told them about the salmon that came in to share with us about how they wanted to come back. And after the war dance, we got a email message from New Zealand that said, do you want your salmon back? We have them. Because we didn't know where they were going to wait. When they went through the ice waterfall and we were told that they would wait for us, we didn't know where that would be. And so we took a trip to New Zealand and found out that they have a mountain there. It's a volcanic mountain, and it's called Mount Rocky, and it has ice waterfalls. And that ice waterfall comes down and runs into the Rockay River. And the Rockay River is a glacier-run river, just like McLeod River is. And the salmon survived. They were there, they were thriving, and we met the Maori people, and they are willing to give us the salmon back. But guess who doesn't want it? The United States, right? So the Maori people asked us, who represents you in Congress? Who represents you? Because in New Zealand, they have 4 Maori people that sit in Parliament who represent the Indigenous Maori people and their issues with the government. And so I'm thinking, I can't even think of a Native American congressman, senator. You know, we had Ben Nighthorse Campbell for many years, but he didn't represent us. He represented Colorado, right? And then, you know, the only state representative is Montana, Jonathan Windy Boy, but he doesn't represent Indigenous peoples. He doesn't even represent the Indians there. He represents the state. So we really don't have any representatives looking out for the interests of the Indigenous people of the Americas, right? We don't even have anybody in the state legislature that represents the Indigenous California Indians and our interests or our needs. We received this blanketed law, tribal law, that comes from back east somewhere, and it comes over us like we're all Plains Indians, you know, and we all fit under, you know, the buffalo theory of life. And they rarely include salmon in those kinds of decisions. So, you know, I'm saying that California Indians need to come together, and we need to say, we are very unique. Our state is very unique. We have a different form of tribalism here, up and down the state. And that we should be treated separate and different, as is Alaska and Hawaii. Now, Hawaii is not recognized, but they do recognize that Hawaii is different. And California is different. We're one of the few states that the government actually mandated killings of Indians for money. You know, we went under a Holocaust here of deliberate killings. And many of the tribes, you know, suffer from that time. And I say that because, you know, people say, well, get over it. That's a long time ago. You know, we're all Californians now. And don't you want to be American? All of that, right? But I'm saying my grandmother, who was a part of my life, was born in 1988. 1888. She was born in 1888 when they were still killing Indians, when they were still hunting the Indians. And so she survived, not because she didn't get shot at, but because she was lucky and made it through that time. And so when they say that's a long time ago, to me it's not. It's like it's one generation from me that they were hunting us. And then my mother's generation, they tried to strip everything from them by sending them to boarding schools. You know, we're Indian enough to go to boarding school, but we're not now. So it's like, maybe you owe us some retribution, you made a mistake. We were not the Indians. And so, they gave payment to the Japanese that went to the concentration camps. It's like, well, probably they owe us because we were not the Indians they were looking for. They made a mistake. But this kind of treatment, for us, we have to come together as California. And under the water politics right now, we have a mandate as Indian people to stand up for the waters. And right now there are our Department of Water Resources are meeting all over the state to convince people about drinking water and the need for drinking water. The Water Board is meeting all over the state to institute the water bonds for wet water, as they call it, in creating reservoirs for storing water. The Bureau of Reclamation is putting out its meetings for storage, including the Shasta Dam rains. The water districts, who are the corporate mega watermongers, I call them, are beneficiaries of all of this water projects. They're the ones, I don't know if you've heard of Westlands Water District. Westlands Water District is out of Fresno, California. That's where their headquarters are. But they are a world-renowned water agency, just like Nestle's. It's world-renowned. They go to every country. They're mega, deep-pocket people. And then you have the residents in Fairmount Farms. You have Kern Water Bank, and you have Metropolitan Water, or your big watermongers, who this water plan that Governor Brown has, which I like to refer to as the Brown Water Plan, is one big toilet. It's one big toilet. That's why I look at it. It's like Shasta Dam is the tank, right? And you come down the tank, and you have the estuary as the bowl, and then you have the tunnels that is the exit pipe. And that exit pipe goes down right to Westlands Water District. Westlands Water District takes a certain amount of water and it waters its selenium-driven poison crops, or threatens to. And if the government subsidizes them, then they don't grow anything, and they sell their water. And then the rest of the water is designed to go off to 2 fracking mines. And then 5 pipes will go off into the desert to create new communities for the 5 million people who are moving to California. So it isn't an instance about Southern California uses too much water with their swimming pools and their golf courses and all of that kind of stuff, as opposed to Northern California. And in fact, Southern California regulates their water a lot better than we do in the north. They have been on a flatline water use, even though they have a higher population than we do, for a long time because of their education issues and that they pay attention to what's going on. And so the public is being confused about where this water is going. And then the other confusing area is that they say the farmers, and I want to separate that, ag business is not farming to me. There are farmers, and I care about the farmers, but I don't think that ag business has any business taking care of our water system. And so ag business is the ones who are saying, well, farmers feed the world, and that little fish is in our way. So it's fish against farmers. It's not like, you have this fish saying, no more water for you people. We're not giving you no more water. It's like they're a picked on little fish that hasn't a clue what's going on because they have been attacked forever, and the little fish is the Delta smelt, the biggest little fish in their way, and the ag business has already killed 99% of them. There's only 1% of Delta smelt left in the world, and they want to kill the rest of them and get them out of the way. Well, the Delta smelt have a major job with salmon, there's a relationship with salmon, that the salmon can't survive without the delta smelt. And this delta is the only place in the world that they grow. And we can't seem to find a way to let the 1% of the fish that are left survive. You know, and right now, I don't know, if you went snagging salmon on the river or in the ocean without a permit, what kind of fine would you get? Huge fine. You might even go to jail for it, right? Well, about this time of the year, or next month and the next 3 months, they'll be drafting down water for the desert, and there will be at least 11 million fish that will be chewed up in the pumps in that period of time. At least 11 million. And what happens to the people who do that? Not a thing. Not a thing for killing that salmon, smelt, everything that gets caught up in the pump is just dead. That's it. So Governor Brown declares the state of emergency, right? We are in a state of emergency for drought. And so he brings President Obama, right? So I send some of my tribal members on that bus to go down there and meet, be there when President Obama gives a speech about the drought. Well, the bus is misled. They can't find where President Obama is going to speak. When they finally find the location, it's 2 miles from where President is going to speak. And all of the other media that is not invited are there. But President Obama is meeting with mega corporation businesses who are attacking the fish, right? Saying the fish are in our way of farming and we feed the world. And so here we have President Obama standing in Fresno, right? Where we export water to Fresno to grow. So essentially, Fresno is a desert without the export of water, right? It's a desert. And right now that desert is reacting. I think their growing years are over. The selenium is coming up. The more water they put on that, because it is a desert, the more salt comes up and they can't grow. Right? It's gone. It's done. Your mine is empty. You can't grow here anymore. Right? So there's President Obama standing in the desert saying, yep, for sure, there's a drought. And they're very concerned because, this is where 80% of the almonds and pistachios that feed America come from. And these farms feed the world. And, after looking at some of this stuff, it's like, you know what? Ag business have 8 crops. They have 8 crops that feed the world. One of them is watermelon. I don't know how many people in the world can survive on watermelon. Right? It's good, let me tell you. But isn't there a place that's better to grow watermelons than in the desert? And cotton and pistachio trees that utilize much more water than a desert should be being watered for. And so there he is, standing in the desert, right? And I guess next they'll go to Death Valley. Maybe they'll put water in Death Valley and grow some crops for a time. And then he can go stand there and say, yep, sure enough, it's a drought area. This is drought for sure. It's like, okay. So then he says, we're going to bring $600 million into California to meet the needs of the farmers who are in the drought-stricken area. So the purple line is drawn about the drought-stricken area, which is right around the desert, right? Right around Westlands Water District, Metropolitan, Kern Water Bank, and nothing from Northern California, where the water comes from, right? And so everybody in the state is thinking, yeah, our reservoirs are empty because it hasn't rained. Just no rain here. So people in Sacramento area are looking Folsom Lake, which is at a poor little 16%. And most of the other ones in the north are at 34%. Shasta is at 35%. Full, empty, whatever you want to call it. But little do people realize that the paper water contracts pumped all the water down south and filled all the reservoirs. So all of the reservoirs in the south are at least at 98%, 89%, 102% full. And Metropolitan Water District for the south and for the desert area say we're good until 2016. And no water problem till then. And so it's like people don't realize that they drain these lakes. And they're looking at the lake, it's like, yep, sure enough, that's a drought. It's like, you can't tell a drought by a lake that is not it's a man-made lake. So you can't really tell we're in drought. What you have to do is you have to look at the Sierra Mountains. You have to look at Mount Shasta. You have to look at Mount Lassen. And when you can see the stone ridges on those mountains at this time of year, that says we're in drought. Because then you have to look at the high mountain meadows that are going to send that water down. Because nothing fills up Lake Shasta except for that mountain and those watersheds that fill, that Lake Shasta is not like it all just automatically fills up. And we're not taking care of any of the high mountain meadows. We're not taking care of anything that are water creators. We're still doing clear-cut logging, which is a drought practice. And we still don't have our wolves back, which are the guardians of the meadows that keep the meadows wide and open. And without the wolves, what happens is that the deer and other animals go straight into the meadows and eat the meadow dry without the wolves. If the wolves are there, the deer learn not to go out in the open because they become prime target for kill. And so the deer and the rabbits and everything eat on the edges of the meadow, keeping it wide and keeping it lush and not trampling into the meadow itself. It also keeps the trees and everything else from encroaching into the meadow, which Forest Service says, that's natural succession. That's real natural. It's like our acorn areas, if we were living in the mountains again, we would be burning under our acorn trees, and the pine trees would not be encroaching on the oak groves like they are. But now, these new scientists, they say that's natural succession. It's like, well, it's not natural when you take us out, when you take the wolves out, when you take the beavers out, then everything gets out of balance. And the beavers are the ones who, in our language, we call them code beasts, which means the sacred center. And wherever the beaver is, they create life because they build ponds. And so there's more birds, there's more animals, there's more everything, there's more fish. And when the winters come, that dam breaks and it's let loose. That water is let loose. But it's let loose in different places each time, so that the tributaries that are running into the river are not cutting a ditch down into the ground like they are right now. You go to the high mountain meadows and you'll see ditches that are deeper than me. And then the water runs off like a fire hydrant. It doesn't pan out over the meadows and it doesn't soak into and recharge the water system so that it comes down, it trickles down throughout the year. It's all done. By this time, it's all done because there's nothing to hold the water back. And so it's like, we need some real people. And these are where the real jobs are. Ag business isn't creating, Monsanto ag business should not be where the jobs are. The jobs need to be in these towns and doing the restructure of every town that's over 50 years old and doing the piping. These towns that are 100 years old have still lead piping in the bottoms of them where the water's running through, and the leakage under these towns are where the water is going out, right? And we have to rebuild our sewer systems. The sewer systems that are created are for a certain population, that they didn't anticipate that communities would outgrow those sewer systems. And those sewer systems are archaic. We have technology nowadays that we could clean up that kind of waste like Mother Nature does and create reusable water. Instead of dumping raw sewage into our rivers, you know, all the way down Sacramento River, every river we got, that's our system, right? We just dump it in the river. It's like we don't drink it. We're not going to drink that water, you know. But also, we need to be aware of, you know, fracking and bottled water companies, and realize that most of us know that there's a finite of water, right? There's like less than 2% of drinkable water in the world, right? We kind of know that. There's a finite of water. There never gets too much more, and there never gets too much less. It just turns over all the time. It comes in, it evaporates, it goes into clouds, it comes down as rain, it comes down as snow, it comes up in the groundwaters. But it's not anymore. It's not like, hey, we found a new lake, a brand new lake, and it's just bubbling over with water. Or this year, you know, all the wells are overflowing. It doesn't happen that way, right? And so we have to look at, can we afford the kind of decisions that are being made for us, like in this groundwater plan? Can the state afford 2 more fracking mines? No. Do we understand how much of our water is being polluted every day or every year? Where is that number? Where do we find that out? How much are we polluting of the water that is available for drinking? We don't know that, right? But we should know it, and I think somebody does know it, because, you know, we're fighting against Crystal Geyser up on Mount Shasta right now. They want to delve into a lava tube, saying, you know, with unlimited taking of this pristine water, all of the water in that lava tube is drinkable. And what they're going to do is they're going to extract 160,000 gallons a day, and they're going to bottle part of it, and the rest of it's going to go into a toxic wastewater. Right? And so can we afford to take pristine water like that and create toxic waste out of half of it? You know, that's what water bottling does. And that's what fracking does. But as the public of California, we need more information. Can we make a good decision that says, yeah, we can afford, you know, 1 more fracking mine, or we can afford another water bottling company, or we can afford coal mining, that slurries and drinkable water, because we have enough drinking water for everything else. Are we calculating how much we're contaminating every year? And do we actually know? Because Lake Shasta has 60 foot of toxic sludge in the bottom from all the mining. And every man-made lake has toxic sludge in it because we mine everything in California. Hydro mine, mercury mine, you know, we did copper mines, we did nickel mines, we did iron mines, we did everything you can think of. And at the bottom of these lakes, they did nothing before they covered them up, right? They just built a dam and covered up the mines. And so in the bottom of Lake Shasta is 60 foot of toxic sludge. Because we were saying, well, we know that there's sediments at the bottom. Dredge out that sediment, and you'll have more volume of water to hold if you take the sediments out. And they said, oh no, we can't do that because, one, we don't know how to do that. And I'm thinking, oh yeah, you do. You can siphon that out. I know how. I'll teach you how to do that. And then they said, well, even if we did, we wouldn't know how to neutralize the poison. And so your answer is to build it higher, and you're thinking that future generations are going to be smarter and brighter, and they will know how to neutralize the poisons in all of these lakes, because these lakes are not natural, so they have no purification systems. And 5 of the lakes in the north the fish are already mercury poisoned, including Shasta Lake. For 5 years now, they've known that. We've been asking them, When are you going to put up signs for the people? You know, it's a world-renowned lake. People come there for the recreation. It's like, I don't see any signs telling the people that these fish are contaminated. And in how many languages will you put that in? And then what will you do for the eagles and the, you know, the other wildlife that eat these fish? And they do nothing, right? And even though we're pointing these things out, it's like, I think that it takes the entire state to start showing up at these meetings and voicing your opinions at all of these water board meetings that are happening throughout the communities. Because every meeting that I've gone to so far, I'm probably maybe one of 3 women, and I'm probably the only ethnic woman there. And the majority of the people in the room are old, white, bald-headed guys over 60 that are in business of farming, that need the water and hate the fish. And we're absent. Young people are almost totally absent at every meeting. And this is what we have to change, you know, because they showed up, and none of them knew that the BDC had already been released, and now they're on a time-ticking process, and that EIR is 35,000 pages long. So, hey, what are you going to do in the next 20 days? But also, the tunnels are going to go through the delta. They will dig up. These tunnels are like 4-lane highways, and there's 2 of them. It's big enough to divert the entire Sacramento River. Of course, they assure me that they won't, and I say, why? Can't you? If it's big enough to divert the entire river, why would you build them big enough if you're not going to divert the entire Sacramento River? Because isn't that pretty expensive to build them that big, and you don't need it that big? You could build littler ones and make littler holes in the ground. But they say, oh no, we can't divert the entire Sacramento. It's like, well, why? Because we don't have a permit. That's scary, huh? Isn't that? We don't have a permit. It's like, how many days does it take you to get a permit? Will the tunnels be done by the time you get that permit? And then the delta and all the salmon in California are at risk. All the salmon in California are at risk, which means the entire coast is going to be at risk, because the thousands of salmon that run up these rivers are going to be absent from the ocean. And the ocean is going to need just as much salmon as it did before. The fishermen are going to catch the salmon, the sea lions, the orcas, everything that eats salmon in the ocean are going to continue to eat salmon, except for they won't have these hundreds of thousands that are in California. So everybody up the coast, all the way to Russia, will feel the effects of this brown water plant. And, you know, and so we're at a dilemma. It's like, our fish are in New Zealand. Should we bring them back yet? I'm thinking, no. We want the salmon back. And the Shasta Dam is said that it is for salmon restoration. It's number 1. Salmon restoration, flood, and export water. And they don't have any design to get salmon around Shasta Dam. But it's for restoration. And their idea is that they'll create a bigger cold water pool. And this is supposed to help the salmon. Even though the cold water pool right now runs from Redding to Red Bluff, and it has not produced the projected number of salmon that it was set up to. So the cold water pool doesn't really create more spawning ground. And so the salmon, they don't have more spawning ground and area, they're not going to spawn more. And so then they say, we're going to dump gravel in the river. It's like, are you totally nuts? Because the river decides where it's going to deposit that gravel. And the gravel is already deposited in the areas of the spawning grounds. Because on the bends that the river goes is how the gravel is going to stack up. And so you're not creating more spawning grounds by dumping more gravel in the river. You have to open up the hundreds of miles of tributaries and upper stream rivers to create more salmon. You have to get them beyond the rim dams, which is the biological opinion in the state, right? But, you know, you have Bureau of Reclamation, who's in charge of building the dam higher and in charge of restoration of the salmon, and then they have created a separate BOR project for restoration and restoring and, I forget what the other term is, for salmon above the rim dams because they got sued. And they say that's not a conflict of interest. Even though if they build the dam higher, they're going to flood at least 3 or 4 miles more of salmon spawning area on these upper rivers before they ever get the salmon there. And of course, they're looking at trucking and hauling salmon because this plan doesn't have any way for the salmon to get there. And it's like they're all scratching their heads and saying, well, how do we get them beyond that dam? You know, 602 feet high. It's like, ask us. You know, we have a plan. We're trying to meet with you. We're trying to share this with you. We want to sit at your table. We want to be there. And they're like, we have postcards in the back to Sue Fry, who's in the movie, where I'm meeting with her, and she's the brought in, newly created position to take care of the salmon. Right? She's there to take care of, and her name's set as appropriate. Sue Fry. And of course, I wanted her to be my best friend, but she is reluctant. So we do have postcards, and she's probably gotten about 1,000 or maybe more, maybe a couple thousand by now. But still, she's so resistant. It's like, I never heard from you. I write to you, I send you things. I ask you for a meeting. I got all these people that support, like I'm a good person, you can have a meeting with me. And I don't hear anything. And now I hear that her plan is to take the fish from Livingston Stone Fish Hatchery, which are all screwed up. You know, they've messed with their DNA, they've messed with their genetics, and they're contaminated. You know, they're at the top of a poisonous area where there's a Superfund site out there on Iron Canyon that overflows every time it's a wet year and it rains. The ponds fill up, they overflow, and they run down into the Sacramento River. And so we want to take the salmon before they ever get that high. But she's going to take the salmon, or she thinks she's going to, take the salmon from there, take them up, truck them up to the McLeod, dump them in the McLeod, and then when they spawn, she's going to collect up the fry, her little people, and then she's going to truck them all the way back down the river and dump them in the river, and they're going to become bait. You know, it's like, this is the worst plan that you could ever dream up on trying to bring back salmon. And I think it's for the purpose to say the salmon can't be recovered. So therefore, it's okay that we flood the river. Because we can't recover the salmon. We've tried. This is what we've done. We spent this much money doing it. And we're saying, we have a better plan. Right now, they spend $80 million on a cold water pool from Redding to Red Bluff to chill the water and get the water going at 56 degrees all the way to Red Bluff, right? And I'm saying, why do you run the water at 56 degrees in an area that never was 56 degrees? And why do you choose 56 degrees? Is that based on scientific study? Well, no, they didn't get a temperature of that water before the dam went in. So they don't know what the temperature was running through Redding to Red Bluff. And I'm saying it wasn't at 56 degrees. And they said, how do you know? It's like, there's only one river that runs at 56 degrees. That's the McLeod. Sacramento River comes off of the bottom part of Mount Shasta. It's not Glacier Run, and so it is not at 56 degrees. And the Pitt River that comes out of Oregon is certainly not 56 degrees. And so when those three rivers came together, that's where they should have taken the temperature for the valley water. And they didn't, right? And so now this is the magical number, 56 degrees. It's like, oh my God. Because even on the McCloud River, you go up there now and you see the little trout that are off on the shallow parts of the, because their predators can't get them. But the water is warmer on the shallow parts, right? They're not out there in the 56 degrees, but they're safe on the edges. Well, Sacramento River, they run it so high, there is no edges. There's nowhere for them to hide. There's no grasses that grow in that kind of transport system. They're running it pretty much full banks all year round. And then they allow the bass that outnumber, 2-year-old bass outnumber the salmon by about 1 million. And they can eat like 25 little fry, each. And so the Coleman Fish Hatchery raises salmon
For the bass.
for the bass. And just this year, they raised so many salmon, they're so successful, that they can only allow them to get 3 inches long. And of course, it's too little for the river, because the river's too low, and so the predators are more vicious in low water. There's less places. But they've trucked 6 million little fry down 180 miles on Sacramento to dump them into, the bait trap. You got all the birds coming in. It's like, oh yeah, here comes food. And all of the pike minnows and the bass, everything that eats salmon, are there waiting, because they don't break it up. It was like, let's dump a few here, or go down the road and dump a few more. Go down. It's like they dump them all. And so then by the time they get to the bay, they calculate that there's 127,000 fish that made it out of the 6 million.
Wow.
And then as they come back, they count them as they come through the gate, and I'm not sure how they do that. Geiger counter or but as they come through, they somehow know these are salmon run, this is for the summer run salmon, these are the winter run salmon, that's going to be the fall run, and they count them like that as they're coming through the gate, right? And I'm thinking, a long time ago, the Indians counted winter run salmon when we were catching the salmon in the winter. They were spawning right there, it's winter time. Yep, that's a winter run salmon. Not when it came through the gate months earlier. And not knowing where they were going to go. It's like, is that salmon going to the McCloud River? Or is that one going to the Feather River? Or the American River? Or where are they going? It's like, and how do you know they're that? Because a long time ago, they didn't really call them that. And the terminology changed. And so now they have a different reference scale. And so our fish in New Zealand, they're totally dumbfounded because they don't know exactly what run that is. Could it be, And then, they're half a world around. The water runs the other direction over there. And those salmon split themselves into 2 different runs. Themselves, right? Because New Zealand had no salmon. It can only have those salmon because there's a warm water belt around New Zealand, and other salmon can't swim into New Zealand, and the salmon there can't swim out of the area. And so it's McCloud River salmon. So we're asking NOAA and now Bureau of Reclamation to help us bring back our salmon. And they're saying, well, those are not the same salmon. It's like, well, you know what? They were taken from this hatchery on this river, our river. They're put in it as eyed eggs in moss buckets. They were shipped down to the ship at San Francisco. They were put on the dock and recorded. Everything's being recorded. They were put on this ship, and you can look at the name of the ship and how many buckets went on there. And then it went to New Zealand, and they docked in New Zealand. They unloaded all of those fish eggs, and you can and it's all documented where the rivers they went. And so it's like, it's pretty well spelled out how that happened, you know, in that process. And I'm thinking, why don't you want to bring back the same DNA salmon to the same river that they came from? And Carlos, who's the DNA god for Noah, he's the only one, we're so lucky, says, well, you know, we tested those salmon's DNA, and they are not from the McCloud River. And I'm thinking, you know, I did hear that you were testing some salmon, and so I asked my friends in New Zealand if they gave you the salmon to test. And they said that they did not. And in fact, if the United States came to New Zealand and wanted to test our fish, there's a whole process for them to go through. And since we are in control of these fish, they would have to ask us before they could ever have one of these salmon to test. So I told them that, and I said, I don't know where you got that fish that you tested, but it's not the ones that I'm talking about. It's not from the Rokai River, it's not from the Naitahu people, because they would know, and they don't know. And so then he goes, well, then can you get us some fish? And so then I'm saying, why don't you want these fish to come back? I mean, what is the real reason that you're so reluctant to bring these fish back? I mean, it's not, you're not even like being worked with. Like, let's see, let's take a look at this. Let's test them. Let's, you know, be a little more positive about the possibilities of bringing them back. And he says, well, what if they're aggressive? Well, they're not aggressive. They don't eat each other in New Zealand. I don't know if they get mad when they got here. Kill all the other fish, I guess. But, and then he says, well, we really don't know that those are the DNA fish from that river. But we do know that the rainbow trout from McCloud River were sent at the same time to New Zealand, and they exist there now in the high mountain lakes, and for a fact, they are the same exact DNA after 100 years, just like the salmon. But he's afraid that the salmon's DNA would not be the same. Why would that be? The trout would be the same, because he can test it, but the salmon would not be, and they would be aggressively killers. So I don't know what he is about. You know, it's like, and then we're in the hallway of the Capitol talking about it, after I just gave a testimony to Chesborough's Fish Commission, which is coming up on the 24th, and people should show up, all the Indian tribes should show up on the 24th at the Capitol to Chesborough's hearing on fish, hearing on the salmon. Anyway, I was there, and we were out in the hallway, and he finally says, because he says, well, you're wrong about the New Zealand salmon. So we had this discussion, right? And so finally he ends it by saying, well, do you have an old fish bone I can test? It's like from the 40s, before the dam went in, do you have some regalia, you know, that has a fish bone on it? It's like, you know what, if I had one, and I wouldn't give it to you. Why would I give it to you? You're so negative. So anyway, the process that we're going through here in California, the tribes really need to get up at the table. And right now there's a whole effort on the part of planning and research, which is the governor's brain, right? They're the planning and research brain part of Governor Brown's projects, that they are sending out people, holding these meetings, and really instigating Northern California Indians against Southern California Indians. that Southern California Indians have been put into touch with Westland's Water District and have made deals now that they're going to get their water through them, the Delta water, and if not the Delta water, they will get Northern California water, right? And so the Southern California tribes, they're saying, we really rely on groundwater, mostly. But because of the drought situations, that all of these wells are at risk. And so they're making these deals with OPR, the Governor's Office of Planning and Research. And so there's a brewing kind of problem starting to bubble up between the Northern California people. The Northern California people who are fighting for salmon water, and Southern California who are mainly gaming and casino and golf course tribes, and they need water because they're in the desert. And so this is being played. It doesn't have to be like that, but it's being played, and we should not take the hook. We should talk to each other. We should set up meetings between the North and the South, and we should come up with agreements as tribal people of the state and not allow them to splinter us the way that they're trying to do right now. And the people in OPR are the advisors who are going out and talking to communities about, and you know that they're fake people, right? Because they're experts in everything. They're the co-leader on the California Tribal Water Advisory Committee, right? They set up this advisory committee, we're all on it, and talking about the water, and they're the co-lead. And they never show up, they never tell us about these important meetings when Westland's Water District and everybody else is, and they're going to do a workshop at that event, and they don't tell the Tribal Water Committee about it to show up. And then they are also the experts on disadvantaged community water systems, right? The low-income people. And they're co-lead on that. And then the next time you hear about them, they're doing workshops on climate change. Same person. They're doing climate change. They're experts on climate change. And then the next thing you know, they're going all around the Bay Area selling people on the BDCP about drinking water. Now they're experts on drinking water, right? And now I just found out that this person is expert on drought. The liaison for drought. Tribal liaison for drought too. Because the Prop 84 monies that are divvied up through the IRWA programs, the Integrated Water Management Programs, that tribes are trying to participate with, well, they're the experts for that now. And their background is merely a psychology degree. What does that mean? Are we getting played? Messing with our minds. They are there to massage us, split us, put us against each other, and create a distraction that we are going to miss the boat. That's what their job is. And that's why we cannot allow them to do that to the Indian people. The tribes have to come together on these water issues. And I'm not sure how to do that. And we need a lot of help getting the people to the same table and working through some of our own issues. We have a lot of issues here in California that we have not dealt with, including the unrecognized issue. Because we, as unrecognized people now, are all descendants of the California claims case. And those people who have history with the California claims case knows that there was a roll taken, a pedigree line that was established showing that we were here before 1850, and it was verified and certified by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the federal government, for this payoff. And when the payoff came, even though many of our tribes objected, including us, objected, individual checks were sent out to every person who had a roll number. And when they cashed those checks, it was considered accepting the terms But there's still over $1 million in the fund, in the California Treasury, of people who did not cash those checks. So there's a little mess happening at the state level about California people. But from that money that was given, all of the people who have roll numbers paid for all of the lands that were given to Indians. We paid for all of the needles and the blankets and the horses and the seeds and the whatever they got. It came out of that budget. The $29 million, it was deducted. You know, BIA is figuring up everything. I think I gave them a jacket too, I don't know, 2 buckets. But it was all deducted from the payment for overall California. So essentially, everybody who has a roll number has an interest in all of the lands that are federally recognized, and therefore should be federally recognized. Even if we're not living on those lands, we should still carry federal recognition because we paid for those lands and nobody's paying us back. You know, it's like, hey, wait a minute. And the last thing we need is tribes living on those lands calling us unrecognized. You know, how silly is that? Well, and then in Southern California, they're totally off the chart there, because the guy looks at me and he goes, from Rincon, and he goes, well, you know, I'm really sorry you guys got terminated. It's like, I said, you know what, only homeless Indians got terminated. Those pieces of land, that's what got terminated. Those rancherias got terminated. Not tribes of Indians didn't get terminated. And so like, he goes, well, you got to know your history. It's like, okay. That's where we have to come together. We do have to know our history. We need to come together and tell our history to each other so that we have a starting place, so that we can stand together and we can take care of what we know needs to be in our areas. The kinds of things, in addition to, you know, whatever the economy, because the state is not taking care of tribes' needs and will not. I mean, we should learn that from Hoopa Reservation, right? They have a special contract with the Bureau of Reclamation for release of water for their salmon, because they are still reliant on the salmon. And this past year, they asked for a release because Trinity River was getting warm, the moss was starting to grow, and the salmon were held up in these deep pools and were not moving on to spawn. So they demanded the water release as per their contract. The Bureau of Reclamation stalled around, said, maybe it'll rain next week. Well, wait for it to see if it rains. And so the Hoopa tribe pushed the issue and forced the Bureau of Reclamation to make the release. When they were going to make the release, Westland's Water District files an injunction against the release because they have paper water contracts that they would rather have the Trinity water pumped over the mountain and sent down the Sacramento River to them. And so the salmon had to wait almost 8 weeks for water while Westlands had this lawsuit going on, right? And so anybody's making deals for this water, you can expect that you're not going to get the water if somebody else needs the water, and Westland's Water District is going to pay more for the water. They're going to make more, and so while you will sue them for not upholding their water distribution, and you will get the penalty. You will be paid, but that's not going to give you water. You'll be paid because it's cheaper to pay you than give you the water. They'll send the water to the highest bidder, and they'll make, you know, billions more than the little bit they're going to be paying the tribe for breaching a contract, because we have no water rights. None of the tribes have any water rights, and so we don't have anything to stand on. I mean, we don't have We don't have the same rights as Weston's Water District, who is a junior water right holder. They are capitalizing on Indian people and us not coming together and not demanding that we sit at the table and work through the water rights issue. And as long as, we got these little tiny contracts going out and Indian people think, oh yeah, I got hold of my water, because I have this contract. It's not the same. It's not the same as a water right. And right now, Westland's Water District and many of the other watermongers are buying up all the water. Westlands have bought 7 miles of our river, the Cloud River. They've bought on the Feather River, on the American River, they're world renowned. T. Boone Pickens bought the Ogallala aquifers. Fields has bought, all these rivers back east. Warren Buffett has bought the Klamath and many other dams. And they're moving into a position of owning all the water, just like they own all the oil. They are not going to be poor because there's no more oil. We are doing extreme mining. And when we're doing extreme mining, it means it's almost over. Tar sands is extreme mining that they would not do before because it's too extreme and too dangerous. Fracking is a method that was deemed too dangerous and too toxic to do. But now they're doing it because they're convincing everybody we need the energy, even though they have technology that changes all that. We have technology now that we don't need hydropower. We have the generators developed that could be put in the aqueduct all the way down that would generate more power than all of the hydro dams that are up there now. And if we line that whole aqueduct with solar panels, we would block the evaporation of water and we would generate more electricity. If we could build communities that are off-grid, and think about building communities off-grid, building reservations off-grid, and making them self-sufficient and independent is possible. We have the technology to do these things. We have technology that are wind generators that are the size of our swamp coolers that would sit on your house, and they're so feather-like that any wind that it picks up would generate and supply electricity for a 2-bedroom house. It's like we have the technology. Why won't we use it? We don't use it because, like in the 70s, they developed the hydro engine, right, for cars, and the patent was bought up like that, right? They still have that. And they could have been using it since the 70s, but they didn't because they want this money to go down this pipe. It's like all of the energy is in a pipe to your house, all of the water is in a pipe to your house, and all of the exit water is a pipe. And at the end of each of these pipes is a corporation. And if you go independent, they don't get that money, right? That's what they don't want. They don't want you to be off the grid. There are penalties for installing off the grid without permits. All kinds of things. But for us, the tribes should be doing that. All of those technologies that are out there should be the target for our reservations and our communities. That we should be lessening our dependency on the corporate world. And right now, we have a long way to go. And we have a lot to work on. And there's a lot of, like my grandma says, Indian people can be really greedy. But they're supposed to be generous. Generosity was a thing that we were known for in the beginning of time here. But we have eventually lost that label, and we have today become more greedy. We're less giving. We're less providing for others. We're more separating out and taking care of our immediately own, instead of a tribal thought of like all the Indian people need food, they all need a place to stay, they all need